When I got my first sinker, I decided to keep my big board for lighter wind, so I got this one for higher wind, which only floats 66% of my weight. I knew I was in for a challenge learning to water start it, so I watched all the YouTube videos I could find and tried a lot of different techniques in my first sessions. I really wanted the stink bug to work, but I could not balance on my knees long enough to get the board to the surface. I think at least part of the problem is the deck is concave, so my knees tended to end up together in the middle of the board as the wind chop rocked me around. So I ended up developing this variation, which combines aspects of the others I tried. So today I want to show you the technique that I finally landed on to ride this, to launch this board. 66% of my weight is what it floats, so if you find a board that has the same percentage of your weight, this technique could work well for you. I put this handle on all my wings. It's a piece of webbing that creates a handle for my hand, and I use that to grab a hold of the wing and the rail of the board at the same time. So, to get with the full explanation, I climb up onto the board from the side and bring my back leg up onto the board first, sinking the rail by holding about a little bit back from the middle of the length of the board with the back hand. The front hand is on the front rail up towards the front. So I'm sinking the board down with my weight, and the handle stops my hand from sinking down at just the right depth with the handle attached to the wing. So your wing is your primary float. You sink the board down to that depth. That way, that allows me to get my knee up onto it, and I get my foot hooked onto the handle on the back of my board. It's got this ridge. My toe's going to be right on that. And now that I've got my back leg and my back knee up, I slide my downwind hand, it has the handle, up so that I sink the nose of the board. And as you can see, I put foot straps on this board so that I can use this launch technique. Once I've got the nose of the board sunk down to this step, it's in a position where I can get my front leg up and get my front foot into the front foot strap. Now, depending on how the wind chop and waves are rocking me around, sometimes I end up bringing my hand up onto the wing for some added support and balance, and because the hand that's way down underneath the water is rocking around, and I might be rocking around above it too far to one side or the other, so I might bring this other hand over here briefly, or bring this hand here. I'll follow up with footage from the water. But in any case, do the best you can to keep your weight over the board using the wing as your outrigger as needed. Once you've got your foot jammed pretty tight into the front foot strap, and I say jammed in tight just for the launch, now I can switch my front hand to the front loop of my wing, continuing to balance the whole time, and I can reach underneath with the backhand onto the front of my boom, or handle if you have handles. So now I'm in a position that it's not quite as awkward on the water because my foot's underwater up to just around there. So it's not bent over so far. I'd be more like this on the water. okay, with the wing held. And now I'm watching for a gust. I don't even have the wing up in the wind yet, so it could be really light wind waiting for a gust. And when I see one coming, I get ready. And when I feel it hitting, so the gust has arrived, I quickly bring the wing up with one quick motion. Now, if you bring the wing up like I just did, you may not have enough power to drive you forward. I've got to bring the wing up and forward so that when I fill the wing is pulling me forward as well as helping to balance. So now I'm using my wing to balance. If I start to fall over to the wind, I'm going to sheet in. This is the usual balance with your wing. Falling downwind, you're going to sheet out. In and out with the back arm. Now you're really kind of going down and up with the back hand. So you're doing the best you can to use your wing to balance. But the important thing is, hopefully you've brought the wing up in enough wind to get a little pump going if needed, and enough wind to start rising the board up from underwater up onto the surface. Now, while you're doing this balancing act, you've got to keep your board angled up, right? So that when you get some forward motion, your board and foil are tending to rise to the surface as you move forwards. So your posture when you're winging, and especially after you popped up, you want to make sure that your posture is such that you're still as low as possible until the board starts to rise up to the surface, or actually really all the way to the surface. You want the board at the surface. You stay low as possible, even when you're doing a little bit of a pump after you pop up. But as you get stronger and stronger wind, you'll come up and keep the pump going if it's not a super strong gust, and eventually you'll get the board up onto the surface where you can finally stand up with the back leg. Okay? Now, because your front foot's in the strap, that transition's not so hard actually. So once your board is up onto the surface of the water, you're basically golden at that point. At that point, you've done the hard part. As long as the wind doesn't die right in that moment, at that point, usually it's pretty much a regular pump up onto the foil at that point, where you're pumping your foil and your wing to finish your launch. The first challenge is when you launch from the beach. You have to swim the board out far enough so that when you launch, the foil doesn't hit the bottom. So I grab the front of the board with one hand and the wing, and I kick underneath the board with my feet up high close to the surface of the water so I don't kick the foil, using my other arm for a kind of a side stroke motion to swim out away from the beach. Okay, let's watch this at full speed first before we break it down. Climbing onto the board, back leg's already up on the rail, sinking with the back hand, slide the hand forward, wait for a gust. Luckily you don't have to wait long because a gust is coming. Here we go. Now this was clearly a good wind situation. The first thing I have to do as I climb onto the board is get my hand situated on the leash. If you have a regular leash, of course, you'll have to wrap your hand around the leash. Try about 8 inches away from the wing to start out, and adjust with each attempt until you find the depth that's right for your weight and your board. Once you're securely gripping your leash, you can slide your hand down the board and push the board down into the water as you bring your back leg up onto the board. Once your leg is up and you get your board more or less level, you can slide your hand forward on the rail to sink the front of the board low enough to get your front foot into the foot strap. As soon as my foot is in, I bring my upwind hand up on top of the wing to stabilize my weight over the board. Then I make sure that my weight is centered over the board before I reach my back hand from the leash onto the boom. Switch my front hand to the front loop. Wait for a gust while keeping my awareness on the board so I stay on top of it. And as soon as I feel the gust hit, swing the wing up and forward of the board to catch the wind and pull me up to the surface of the water. Once the board's at the surface, the hard part is done. Unless you've popped up in too little wind, then you're going to have to do some vigorous pumping and hope you don't have to start over again. Let's watch me do another launch. Got a similar mount, slightly different camera angle. Get my hand in a loop. Get my back knee up. Help with the back leg. This time I tip the board a little bit more edgewise into the water, which the problem with that is now I have to level it back out, which takes a second. Now I either misjudge that there's enough wind when I decide to go for it, or I don't bring my wing far enough forward in front of the board, or a combination of both, because you'll see what happens. Let's watch one more successful mount going the other direction. My knee up on the back, foot in the strap. This time I put my front hand on the loop before I put my back hand on the boom. The order doesn't matter. The principle of using the wing as a outrigger is the important thing to keep your balance. This is the best position to wade in for the gust. So this time I have to stay on my back knee a little longer because I don't have as much wind. I do a little mini pumps with the wing to get some board speed before I feel comfortable standing up finally. And giving a couple little pumps with the board standing up, and we're off.